Dr. Ian obtained a specialist qualification in internal medicine from the Semmelweis Medical University, Budapest, in 1997. He obtained full registration on the Specialist Register in General Medicine in the UK in 2004 and worked in various posts, including as a locum doctor in many hospitals around London and southern England and also as a locum medical advisor between 2005 to 2017. In November 2017, he moved back to Budapest to study for a diploma from the School of Tropical Medicine. In June 2018, Dr. Ian began working as a telemedicine prescriber for 2 UK online pharmacies, Active Healthcare and Essence Pharmacy. On February 13, 2019, the CQC undertook an unannounced inspection of Maiden Consulting Limited online pharmacy following a complaint about the company from a member of the public in November 2018. Subsequently, on February 25, 2019, a referral was made to the GMC by the CQC regarding Dr. Ian's practice as the prescribing doctor. On February 24, 2020, a further referral was made by the General Pharmaceutical Council following concerns raised by a patient's husband regarding some prescriptions issued by Dr. Ian as the prescribing doctor at Active Healthcare. Dr. Ian's hearing took place in June 2022, and it was found that he had inappropriately made a number of online prescriptions to 6 patients. The tribunal found that Dr. Ian had failed to communicate effectively, take adequate histories, or examine the patients, and had also failed to communicate with the patient's general practitioners, arrange any follow-up, or keep any medical records. In the case of 4 patients, the amount of medication prescribed was found to be excessive. The tribunal determined that Dr. Ian's actions amounted to serious professional misconduct and that his fitness to practice was impaired. It noted that his level of insight into his actions was low, and that his attitude throughout the hearing was deemed flippant. While the tribunal acknowledged that Dr. Ian had taken an initial step towards remediation, it was not sufficient, and without greater insight into his misconduct, he would be unable to fully remediate. The tribunal suspended Dr. Ian's registration for 6 months and directed that a review should take place before the end of the period of suspension. The tribunal reminded Dr. Ian that the onus would be on him to demonstrate how he had addressed the concerns raised and that he was fit to return to practice without restriction. The reviewing tribunal may be assisted by evidence such as a statement of personal reflections demonstrating ongoing insight and remediation, evidence that clinical knowledge and skills have been kept up to date during the suspension, and any other information that Dr. Ian thinks will be helpful. Dr. Ian was not present at the hearing but provided a reflective statement through his counsel. The tribunal received several pieces of evidence, including the June 2022 tribunal's determinations, Dr. Ian's CV, training documents, appraisal certificates from 2018 to 2023, testimonials, and information regarding job offers. The tribunal has considered all the evidence received. During the hearing, counsel for the GMC submitted that it was for the tribunal to determine whether Dr. Ian's fitness to practice remained impaired and that it was Dr. Ian's responsibility to demonstrate that he is safe to return to unrestricted practice. The counsel stated that the GMC's position was neutral with regards to Dr. Ian's fitness to practice. The defense counsel for Dr. Ian reminded the tribunal that this was the first review of Dr. Ian's suspension and submitted that it was for the tribunal to decide whether his fitness to practice remained impaired. She drew the tribunal's attention to the relevant common law precedent. The defense submitted that Dr. Ian had reflected on his conduct in the last 6 months and had understood and accepted the decision made by the 2022 tribunal. The counsel stated that Dr. Ian had acknowledged his responsibility in the issuing of prescriptions, the need to follow appropriate guidelines, and that he should have resigned from his role as an online prescriber. The defense counsel submitted that Dr. Ian was aware of the risk that his actions in overprescribing posed to patients and was remorseful for his actions. He had expressed sincere apologies and acknowledged that the public and fellow medical professionals would be disappointed and angry about his actions. The counsel drew the tribunal's attention to Dr. Ian's training and reflection on relevant guidelines, positive testimonials received from his previous employer and a patient, and the revalidation of his license to practice internal medicine in Europe. The defense counsel submitted that Dr. Ian's level of insight was now good and there was no risk of his misconduct being repeated. She invited the tribunal to determine that Dr. Ian's fitness to practice was no longer impaired. The medical practitioners tribunal reviewed the case of Dr. Ian and considered all evidence presented, including the determinations of the previous tribunal. The tribunal found that Dr. Ian's reflective statement was comprehensive and demonstrated his acceptance of responsibility for his actions, understanding of potential harm caused to patients and the medical profession's reputation, and acknowledgement that his actions fell seriously below expected standards. The tribunal also noted his expression of regret and deep remorse, as well as his apologies to patient B and her family, which were seen as significant demonstrations of a change in attitude. Dr. Ian's appraisals and European practice certificate were also considered, leading the tribunal to conclude that his knowledge and skills were up to date and there was very little risk of repetition. As such, the tribunal determined that Dr. Ian's fitness to practice was no longer impaired and revoked his suspension with immediate effect, as it had already marked the seriousness of his actions through the length of suspension served.